Hello and welcome to my tutorial slash playthrough of Warlock, Master of the Arcane. This is a 4X game, I believe that is what the genre is called. It's basically like Civilization. But it is fantasy themed. It is, and it's quite humorous actually at times. So it's a little bit joke themed, a little bit of fantasy there. So that's what this game is. It should be pretty familiar if you are familiar with the 4X style games. It doesn't do a whole lot of things differently. Very similar to Civilization. That said, though, I think it does a couple of things better. I hesitate to say better. Different. Let's just say different. And I quite enjoy what Warlock Master of the Arcane does. I think this is a great game, and that's why I'm doing this playthrough. In case you didn't know, I am your host, Gamer Vince, and without much further ado, let's just jump into the game. So I'm going to be going over sort of the basics in this video. I'm going to get you guys set up and playing this game if you if you've got this game. It was just on sale on Steam. It's they had the Paradox sale, so if you acquired it during that sale, here's how you play. If you're unfamiliar with these sorts of games. All right, so we're gonna click New Game, and if you have the expansion packs, you're gonna get, which I think at this point, I think the expansion packs are just bundled all together. So if you just bought it, you should have the expansion packs. But there's a couple of different game modes you can take. Well, there's really only two game modes, and then these are different ways to win. So one game mode is Armageddon, which is actually very tough. The Armageddon game mode, you're basically going to have demons, or Dremers as they're called, port into the game sort of periodically and mess up the landscape, and they're very tough, and it's a pretty difficult game mode. I do not recommend that this is where you start, but it is something available once you feel like you've got a good handle on the game. Armageddon can be sort of a new challenge. And then here's the way to win for the normal games. There's defeat the great mages, which is just defeat your opponents. It's capital victory. If you claim their capital, the great mage, which are the other players, you are a great mage yourself. If you take their capital, they are defeated. That's also how you are defeated. So defeat the great mages. That's just sort of normal. Defeat an avatar. Avatar of the gods can show up I believe if you have to really annoy one of the gods, and since every god has an opposed god, so if one god really likes you, then that means another god really hates you. At a certain point, they'll send an avatar after you, and if you can defeat that, you can also win that way. I normally click that off because I think it's kind of a lame way to win. I want to fight the actual opponents and not just kind of do my own thing, worship my own gods, get an avatar, and do that thing. For that same reason, I also get rid of Unity Spell. Unity Spell is casting of a very powerful end game spell. It takes a lot of mana, which is a resource, and it takes a long time to cast. So, it's basically, but when you cast it, you just win. And I find that supremely lame because you could essentially do it without ever interacting with your opponents. So, I do, however, leave the 50% of Holy Grounds. Holy Grounds are a resource on the map, and if you own, if 50% of them fall within your borders, you win. But I feel like at that point, if you own, you'll likely own more than half the map. If this is the case. You can own less than. You can just try to sort of pinpoint the Holy Grounds and get them. But I feel like owning 50% of the Holy Grounds is actually quite tough, and you'll probably have to step on some people's toes doing it. So I feel like this one's okay, and it's a good one to have if you don't want to just have to defeat on larger maps. If you don't want to have to go and find every little great mage. You know, even if they're like stuck in the corner of the map and not really a threat, you still have to go and stomp them out if you only have to defeat the great mages. You can win before you sort of get to that last little bit with capture of the 50% of holy ground. So that one I think is fine as well. And then there's the difficulty rating. You notice that last time I was playing this on impossible, which is far from impossible. Your opponents get a lot of perks. It is tough to play on impossible, especially your first game out. So I obviously do not recommend starting on impossible, but pretty much no matter who you are, I feel like you can start on normal. Relaxed and casual. The game is not that difficult because the AI is not that good. And the AI doesn't get better with the settings. Like from normal, challenging, and impossible, I think the AI plays pretty much the same. I don't know how they really play on casual, but you can start pretty safely on normal, I would say. If you do play on normal and you're completely new to this genre, I mean there's casual and relaxed available. You know, I always feel like, you know, if you're playing a game, you should have fun, and if you want to try something wacky or you just want to sort of explore the game, you know, pick up a game on relaxed. And you know, what is a strategy game? I think that sums it up pretty well. That you're not going to need strategy. You can kind of just do whatever. Just explore the game and have fun with it. So I think that might actually be a good way to learn. I'll kick up the game on normal just so I can sort of show you guys what it's like and what you can expect on the normal difficulty level. Alright, so next we've got this screen here where we're setting up the world and our opponents. You have 4 sizes of maps to pick from, either small, medium, large, or huge. So S, M, L, or XL. I quite often play on a small map, and that's what I'll be playing on now. Because I like shorter games. I like to be able to just defeat usually 2 great mages, and then the game is done. Which means that quite often with that, you don't really get to the very late game, which has some of the biggest units, some of the most interesting units, to be perfectly honest. So I'm going to be setting up a small game here. And I'll play all the way through it. This first video is just going to be sort of the setup and explanation. And then the next video I'll actually just play through the game. And maybe explain a couple more nuanced points. But yeah, I'll do a small map for now, so that's pretty self-explanatory. Then you have what type of land you're going to have. You can have great land, supercontinent, continents, and islands. Basically, this is telling you your water to land ratio. Islands, a lot of water, and you've got a couple of small islands. Continents is what the game, I think, defaults to, where you have, to be perfectly honest, it's more like large islands. That's what you have. I mean, yeah, I guess they're continents, but you're going to have to cross water at some point. I usually play on supercontinent, where there's a little bit of water, but everybody's sort of on one continent. Sometimes you'll get like 2. Depending on how large of a map you play. It minimizes the amount of water you have to cross, and I like that. I could just play Great Land, where there's not very much water at all. There are lakes, no longer oceans. Supercontinent, there's still an ocean around your continent. Even if there's only one, there's still ocean around it. Great Land, there is just land everywhere, and there are lakes. So that's really the difference here. Units that are land-based units that are crossing water are incredibly weak when they are crossing water. They turn into like a boat, they lose all their special abilities, and they're reduced down to 10 health. You could have a 90 hit point troll that has got like defenses like crazy, try to cross a stream, a single point of water. It takes an entire action to get in the water, an entire action to get out of the water. So he gets in the water, and then all of a sudden there's a unit you missed, and it just, harpoons it, and you've lost that very expensive unit because it couldn't defend itself. I hate that. I don't think that is one thing I'm not a huge fan of in this game, but it's something, it does add a little bit of strategy that you you can try to, force your opponent into the water and do that kind of thing. But crossing it, I think, is such a pain that I usually try to avoid it. That's why I play on supercontinent as opposed to continents. So I recommend, especially for your first game when you're sort of not sure how to deal with water, supercontinents are great land. It's a good way to go. Over here is pretty straightforward. Is the number of rival players you have on a small map. You can only have 1 or 2. We'll play with 2 because why not? And then there's the number of additional worlds. I'm not a fan of additional worlds. They don't really. You can just ignore them. It's not like they really hinder you. I usually put additional worlds to the minimum of 1. If I could take it off, I would just take it off. But so additional worlds are portals you can find across the map, and they teleport you to another plane with very, very powerful monsters. There's some valuable things in there, but it's not usually worth your time to go there. It's too troublesome to deal with it. If you were playing on a large map and a really long game, then it might be worth it, because then you have the time. I feel like if you're playing on a medium or small map, I wouldn't bother with additional worlds. If you're playing on a large or huge map, it might be worth looking into. So additional worlds, I just keep it 1 and ignore the one that pops up. 2 great mages, 1 additional world. Last thing you can pick is if you want a flat world or cylindrical world. Basically just means if you go off the edge of the map on the right, you'll just appear on the left. If it's a cylindrical world, if it's a flat world, there are literally corners of the map. There's just edges along all the sides. On a cylindrical world, you still have edges on the top and the bottom. The north and south still have edges, but the east and west do not. Okay, so it's a cylinder, not a sphere. Alright, next. So here is where this is where you're actually already starting to play the game. Like this I'll consider setup, and pretty much no matter what you pick, it's all fine. Here's where you're actually really starting to play the game. Like, you can take the pre-generated characters. Like, these are some of the expansion characters. Like, there's Mirabal's the Hat. He's, the standard poster child of the game. And then you've got some of the expansion characters. If you go to the left here. What I recommend you do is hit Customize. And then you can pick what abilities and perks they get. So the pre-generated characters basically just have a random assortment of these perks and spells. And they have their own race and color faction. I think you can pick your color. No, you can't pick the color. So you can do a pre-generated one, but why do that when you can pick your own? You can kind of do whatever. All right, so one of the most important thing that's the most important thing you can pick is your race. There are 4 races if you have the Return of the Elves expansion, which again you probably do if you bought the game recently, but this is an expansion race, the Arthi Elves. And so these are the 4 different races. The undead are mana based, so these guys are living characters. They eat food, so they need food to survive. Undead cities use mana instead to sustain themselves. So undead have can produce lots of mana, which means they can usually cast lots of spells. So undead are a pretty good choice. They're very mana heavy. They don't need very much food. They still need gold. And so there's 4 resources: mana, gold, food, and research. Research is to research more spells. And each race sort of focuses on one. The undead are the masters of mana. The monsters are masters of food. Food is kind of a crappy out of the 4 big resources. I feel like food's probably the weakest because any excess food just gets turned at a unfavorable rate into gold. So food is like worse gold. You still need food, so it's good to have it, but I feel like producing excess of it like the monsters do is just a crappy way to get gold. So that said though, even though the resource they focus on, the monsters have a big advantage in terms of units, I want to say. The trolls are very powerful. The shamans are not bad. You've got some really good units with the monsters. The undead, I think, have some really specific monsters. They have, for instance, ghosts that are immune to the 2 most common types of damage. But that said, they're kind of weak overall, and the undead have some other interesting units like Draco Liches and vampires that are, they're not super tanky, but they've kind of got interesting things going. Humans, I feel like, have the weakest units overall. They don't have any really good tank units. The monsters have a lot of really good tank units. The humans, though, have that big advantage of producing lots and lots of gold, which is the one resource you probably want the most of. So humans are the best at producing gold, and that is the best resource. So, you know, take it as you will. The Earthy Elves I do not recommend for a new player. They, because they, even though they're good at producing research, for some reason they kind of are the worst at all the other resources. They're missing some crucial buildings that make them produce lots of food, gold, and mana. Well, mana they produce actually more than the humans and monsters. That is true. But they don't produce a lot of gold, and they don't produce a lot of food, which is sort of what you need at the beginning. They're very basic resources, and I feel like you'll struggle with that, especially considering that they have the most expensive units. Now, they have the most powerful units. Their archers are better than anybody else's archers. Their sort of spearmen are better than the equivalent of the other guys. They're just more powerful, but they're more expensive. So, the Earthy Elves, I highly recommend you play them at least once when you're a little bit more advanced, because they're interesting and they've got some cool abilities. The Tyshar Knights are some of my favorites. So, they're definitely worth checking out. They're not bad. They just take a little bit more to play. I'm going to be playing the monsters for this playthrough because I feel like they're the easiest. You don't really have to worry. The humans are good with gold, but don't have access to that great units. They've got good mid-game units. Their end-game units kind of suck. The undead are kind of weird from the rest of them as well. So monsters are sort of, to me, like the generic ones you pick. So we'll pick monsters, and I always go with color red. This is just the color that you'll appear. Like each great mage has a color that their units appear, so that's all this means. Like there's blue, red, yellow. The stripes don't mean a dang thing, so pick red. Alright, now here perks. This is where you get to pick your perks. I'll unselect the perks for this guy, for Amberon the Dark. Oh, by the way, you can rename yourself, so I will be Lord Bits. And I always pick this guy because I like his portrait. You can pick any portrait, I don't think it matters. Yeah, you can pick whatever you like. You can be Two-Headed Dragon, you can be that dude, you can be Anubis, you know, whatever floats your boat. So here you get to pick a couple of things. The perks are much better than the spells. All these spells, with the exception of the favor spells, you will probably get throughout the game. So if you're picking spells, pick spells that help you early game, like Summon Imps. Summon Imps is the only one that I would actually worry about having, simply because it can summon units cheaply and quickly. So Summon Imps is actually quite a good one. Now, you're not going to have any mana at the beginning. You're going to be very mana starved at the beginning. So even though it's cheap for a spell, you're still not going to be able to cast it a whole lot. So one combination you could go is Summon Imps plus Mana Vault. Mana Vault just gives you 100 mana to begin with, and that could be almost 3 Imps. So that's not a bad way to start, to have a couple of Imps run around and explore the map for you and get into some fights. So that's one thing you could do. But aside from Summon Imps, I would really focus on the perks. So most of these are resource based, like Mana Vault, you get 100 mana. Treasury, get 100 gold. Magnet, you get a 10 gold per turn. So notice that's production, that's 10 gold per turn. Trader is 20% gold production, an extra 20% gold production per turn, which that's very good. And there are there's Farmer, which is for food, and Researcher, which is for research. Most of these are pretty straight up. Unit Power for Glorious Tactician is basically 10% extra damage. I think pretty sure that's all it does. I don't think it gives you anything else. Instructors experience for your units. So XP in turn. Yeah. So in a turn, all your units are going to get 1 XP, which is okay. It's not actually that much experience. Most units need, like, I think a level up takes about 20, 30, 40, 50 experience, depending on the unit, I think, and depending on how often it's leveled up already. So at one experience per turn, it'll take like 20, 30 turns for your unit to level up, if that's all they're getting. So it makes a little bit of a difference. It's a nice supplement, but it's not gonna just super level up your characters. So that one's alright. Conjurers, bonus mana. The ones that I don't really recommend are like Elven Followers and Demonic Advisor, which gives you a very powerful unit at the beginning of the game. Well, not very powerful. It gives you what's called like a mid-tier unit at the beginning of the game, which is kind of nice, but if you notice the upkeep, notice that it says -8 gold, -1 food, -1 mana. Yeah, that's how much they cost per turn. And at the beginning, you're not making very much at all. In fact, it could put you in the negative just to have these units. So I don't think they're really worth it. It's more of an advanced player kind of thing if you want to do like a rush strategy. You want to rush your opponent or something like that, which is very difficult. Capitals are very difficult to take at the beginning of the game. So yeah, I wouldn't bother with these at the beginning. Same with Master of Blades. It's these 3 units here. Lord of Coatls and Elven Relatives are just a resource you can get to get some unique units at the beginning of the game. And these might actually be worth it, especially if you're playing a race like the humans, when it's like, I'm not really going to get that great units end game, so maybe I'll become Lord of Coatls and get some variety here. That said, though, these things also don't really produce great end game units. They produce more mid-tier units, so take that as you will. So I really focus on the perks, the spells. These favor spells. So there's 8 different gods that you can worship, and worship and basically getting one of these favor spells not only does something, like for instance the Favor of Agrelia gives you a healing spell that heals, so that's nice, and on top of that you get a good relation with the god. These things I don't usually go for. I don't think they're that great. First of all, the spells are okay. None of them are particularly great. And second of all, I rarely focus on worshiping the gods. It's something you can do, but really don't have to. So these favor spells, if you really want to go for it, I'd say go for it. I wouldn't do it in your first game just because it's kind of expensive at 6 perk points. You only get 10. So I think these spells, they're alright. Alright, now that I talked about all of that, which ones am I going to pick? I'm going to pick Trader and Magnate. I think those are the ones I'm going to do for this playthrough. One, to highlight the importance of gold. Having extra gold is great because you can buy perks. You can make your units next to invincible if you have enough money to throw at them and the right resources on the map. So Magnate at the 10 per round is going to help us early on, and then Trader will help us later. And then on top of that, and I'm just going to pick a couple of spells. Notice that when you're down to like 2 perks, there's nothing really good to take. The Mana Vault, I'm not really going to be casting. I could take Mana Vault and get 100 mana, but then I have no spells to begin with to cast, so that doesn't really help me. The extra 100 gold for my for Treasury it's not really that great, to be perfectly honest. There's a reason why it only costs 1. It doesn't help you a whole lot. I'm going to take Lesser Shadowbolt and Lesser Heal, just so that's 2 spells I don't need to research. And 2 spells I then have available to my at the very beginning of the game. Alright, I think that's ready to go. I know that was a lot of information to digest, but now we're actually going to jump into the game. And I also feel like, even though that was a lot of information to digest, most of it, You know, like that's to play strategically.
Requested your aid.
And you can really kind of, during the setup, you can almost do whatever. Okay. Now to actually get to the game. So if you've played a 4X game before, yep, this should be really, really familiar. You know, you've got your hexes, your units occupy hexes. You've got a city that you can give orders to. Here is a neutral city. That might be something you're unfamiliar with. If you see this kind of blue border, this dark blue border, that is a neutral city that you could conquer with impunity. They don't really have, there's no such thing as like diplomacy with these neutral cities, so you don't need to worry about that. So you can just kind of conquer it when you get to it. Now that said, your beginning units are not strong enough to conquer it yet, and also when it comes to these small cities can fire upon units up to a hex away, or rather 2 hexes away. You notice that when you hover over the city, if you see capital in the bottom left-hand corner there, next to the Ratman, it says capital, range 2, attack 5. So you can attack with the capital, with cities, and these things are no exception. They can attack as well, and this city over here can reach right here. So be very careful with getting near those cities. They're just going to shoot you, and they'll do a little bit of damage. I mean, it's not going to be a whole lot. But let's give some orders. So on the right-hand side here is like all the stuff you need to do this turn. Well, not need to, but should do this turn. So first, select a new research spell, and then you've got this research panel, which is going to be 5 spells sort of randomly selected, and you can research one of these 5 spells. Don't worry, if you research one of the spells, the other 4 are going to remain exactly as they is, and then the spell you research is going to be replaced by another choice. That's kind of how the research goes. I'm going to research Ghost Wolves, which is a summoning spell. It takes 2 turns to cast. So you notice it says casting time 2 hourglass. That means 2 turns. Here, this number here is how long it takes to research. So it's going to take 7 turns to research the Ghost Wolf. So I'm just going to click on that, and that pops into this corner right here and starts researching it. If you regret your choice, just click on it and switch it up. So this is your research panel. This is your casting panel. You click on it. Here are the spells I could cast. I can't cast any of them because I only have 5 mana. But this is where your researched spells are. You can sort them by attack, healing, whatever. I only have 2 spells, so it's not a very complicated list right now. But as the game goes on, it can get more complicated. Up here, it gives you a summary of your research. You've got your research points, a summary of your resources. It's hard to speak sometimes. Here are your research points, which is to research spells. Here's your mana, which is to cast spells. Your food, which is a static number. That doesn't get. There's nothing left over that you get here. That's just how much food you have. If you go into the negative food, your cities will not grow as fast. So you want to stay positive on the food, but you know, if you're literally at 0 food, I'm pretty sure it's still a green number. That's fine. 0 food is perfect. Very efficient of you. So you don't need extra food. You know, it's good to have a leeway if you're summoning units. If you're making units that take food. So, you know, it's always good to have, like, you know, 5-10 food on hand, but you don't need it. And then gold, this is gold and mana you want to have as much of as possible. Notice that I have 0 mana, but I'm getting 5 a turn. I've got 100 gold to start with, and I'm getting 18 gold a turn. And, you know, 10 of that gold is coming from Magnate. So almost literally half of my income right now is just coming from a perk I picked. So I'm getting a lot of gold from that Magnate, which is why I think it's a good one. Helps you early game. Alright, so that's resources. Over here, you get quests. So I got that, by the way, is also here. You have a new quest you can click on and be like, kill the Ratmen. That's these guys over here. Notice that they've got a glowy thingy on top of them. If you want to go to it, you can be like, yes. Here are the Ratmen. I've got a quest to kill the Ratmen, and if I don't do it within the 20 turns, I lose 20 gold. But if I do it within the 20 turns, I get 90 gold. Okay, a little nice thing. You also have, there are these things called heroes. They're special units. They'll appear here. For hire, it'll say like this lord wants to join you, and then you can click on this panel and hire them. You can also give them items. Here you have your list of units. These are all the units I have. It's not a terribly useful panel in my opinion. Here you have open closed world panels. So I was telling you about those additional worlds. This is where you can flip between them. So if you ignore the additional worlds, you can... Most of the stuff, to be perfectly up here, you can kind of ignore. I mean, there's the options menu, the different worlds. Here's your list of cities. There's only one right now, but it tells you like, oh, it's making my capital is making this much gold and has this much food and this, that, and the other. These panels you can pretty much ignore though. Use them if you can use them for like strategic overviews, but other than that, they're not terribly useful. Alright, and down here, obviously have the mini-map, and here it is, so these things are sort of what you can do. Like I said, as they move down, this is just the most recent one you've got going. So it says construct building, so if you click on that, it'll open up the city view of the capital, and when you've got the city view in, here are buildings, here are units. You can build a building and a unit at the same time. The rest of the stuff gets queued. You can only have as many buildings as you have population in the city. You start off with a population of 4 in your capital and 3 buildings. So you can build one more building and then you'll have to wait a little bit. If you want to, what I highly suggest you do with your capital is build towards mid-tier and end-game units. Don't focus on resources with your capital. Focus on powerful units. And the way to figure out how to get to powerful units, you might look at this and be like, I guess I can get some rat men. That sounds good, I guess, but I don't see any other units here. It says I can't build a harbor or a fishing village because there's no water around here. Like, there are no free construction sites for new buildings. That's kind of a lie. There are free construction zones, but in order to make a harbor or a fishing village, you need water. But is that it? No, it's not it. If you click show all buildings, here are all the buildings you can build. And what I highly recommend is you go in here the first time you play, which is kind of a pain because it's not very well organized. It's just sort of in a random order. And you find a building that seems powerful and build towards it. So for instance, I might be going like, I really want shamans. So it says required alchemy laboratory. Okay. So the reason why you can't build this building is because you don't have an alchemy laboratory. And then somewhere in here is going to be an alchemy laboratory. Yeah, here we go. Alchemy laboratory. Required mana trap. Oh, that I can build. So you can build a mana trap, then build an alchemy laboratory, then get your shaman's guild. Which, you know, that's a way to get those. For the monsters, I'm going to be using trolls. I love trolls. They're really good. It says required tax offices. And the tax offices require a Ratman guild. So I'm going to build a Ratman guild so I can build tax offices so I can get a troll bridge. So that's what I recommend you do with your capital, is build towards these bigger, better units. One thing that I also will tell that you need to watch out for, notice that the trolls bridge says trolls and old trolls. That's a lie. You cannot build... Old trolls are the advanced version of trolls. You need another building in order to get the old trolls. Yeah, the same is true for ordained shamans. When you build a shaman's guild, you can't build the ordained shamans, you can only build the shamans. In order to get the ordained shamans and old trolls, and the werewolves have also court werewolves, you need this other building called... It's the Military Academy. There it is. So, notice that the Military Academy says required for ordained shamans, old trolls, and court werewolves. You cannot build those very, very powerful endgame units until you have a Military Academy. And also, you need the corresponding buildings. You need the Troll Bridge and the Military Academy to build old trolls. Okay. Hope that was clear. Even if it isn't, you can kind of... I think you can experiment with this. As long as you've got some kind of... If you get a Trolls Bridge, a Shaman's Guild, or a Chateau de Loup-Garou... Yeah, that's the one. Chateau de Loup-Garou. Kind of like the French theme they've got going here. If you build one of those 3 buildings as the monsters, you'll really be fine, because you'll have access to good units. Okay. Unit-wise, I'm going to build some goblin archers. I think archers can attack units without getting attacked back. Melee units do not. Melee units run into enemy units and you both take damage. Archers just shoot at something and don't take damage. So archers, I feel like, are just better. Okay. If you see this horn symbol here, which that's a horn, it says assign unit orders. That's what that means. So I click on my ratmen here, and I'm going to go exploring. Actually, I'm going to kill these wild ratmen. That's what I'm going to do. So I just moved. Oh, I shouldn't have done that so quickly. See, when you see this, I just moved my units here. If you see the gold, that means they can move there. If you see the, like you notice over here, that last little bit is, it shows you the gold is where they're going to end up this turn. And then if I can order them to go here to head towards there, and they'll complete it over multiple turns. The white stuff they'll do in subsequent turns. But I don't want to move them there. Instead, I want them shooting here. Again, these guys have a range of 2, and they have a missile attack of 7. That's what this means. This is their movement. This is their rank. And yeah. So I'm going to just shoot these guys. When you see that little arrow symbol, like, you know, this is like, it has a little shoe symbol for walking. No symbol if it's not possible. And here it's the little arrow symbol. I'm going to shoot them. So that's what we're going to do. So we just killed a bunch of those ratmen. Yep, they're pretty dead. And then I'm going to take my ratmen robbers. I'm going to move them over here and then attack. See, notice how it has the melee attack symbol, and it tells you here. I didn't get that with. Wait, yes, I did get that with the archers, but here it tells you like attacker is going to do on average 2 damage because they only have 2 health left, and the defender is going to on average deal 1 damage. That can change with criticals and things like that, so that's not a guaranteed outcome, but that's in general what it'll be. So click on that. They fight. They did a little bit of damage to me. Yeah, they did 1 point of damage, but we killed them. Hooray! And we completed the quest for 90 gold. Easy way to get gold. Actually, so one of my rivals is right here. It's that blue there. Notice that is a different blue from this blue. So I know it's a little weird. So that's the basics of just controlling your units. Now it's telling me I've got a new unit. Oh, great. I can recruit Goblin Spearmen. That's nice. I can also recruit Goblin Archers. I don't know why it didn't tell me about that. Once you've run out of stuff to do, you'll get end turn. You can always hit enter to end turn prematurely. So don't hit enter unless you mean to end turn. I know that in some games it's chat. No, in this game it is end turn, so do not hit enter. Or return as the key I think is properly called, but don't hit it. And then when end turn will come up here when you really have nothing else to do. That's not entirely true. You can give orders to your cities to build units. That is the one thing it won't tell you to do, is build units. But, you know, I kind of feel like you don't want to spam units anyway. You don't want to build units as quickly as you can, simply because all units have an upkeep. Oh, by the way, if you right-click on a unit, you get this panel here. So it's Goblin Archers. They give you a little bit of funny lore. They tell you about the resistances they have, and if you hover over the resistances, exactly what that means. Like, these guys have resistance 25 melee. What does that mean? It means they take 30% less damage from melee. Just like, and life magic they're really resistant to, and everything else they just take full damage. And the upkeep is what's important. Like, this Goblin Archer is costing me a money and a food. A money per turn and a food. So, that's important. Ratman Robbers, same thing. Like, you can just click on your units, learn a little bit about it. Yeah, these guys are animals, which means, or beasts, which is why their missile attacks deal extra damage to them, which is extra awful. And that about covers it for sort of the basics. You also have a diplomatic relations window, like here are the different mages. If I found them, which, I mean, I see one of them there, but I'm not close enough. Like, if I go to an perfectly overhead view, I wouldn't even know that they're there. I can kind of peek underneath the cloud coverage to see that it's there, which is a little wonky. But, like, the diplomatic window, to be perfectly honest, most of the agreements you can have don't mean dick. If you have an agreement with a mage, it'll be like, "Hi, we have a non-aggression pact," which doesn't mean anything. You can undo the non-aggression pact at any time. Same with an alliance. So diplomacy doesn't mean a whole lot. The only ones that really mean anything is if you demand something from an opponent, like money or gold, and if they refuse, it's war. By the way, you cannot attack other Great Mage's units unless you go to war. So if you see another Great Mage's units, don't worry unless you're at war. As far as terrain goes, you'll notice that there are pumpkins over here and there are pumpkins over there, and you've got some silver here, and what is that, iron? So there's these different resources that are scattered about, as well as just the terrain itself as sort of properties. Like here, barren desert. So any kind of building that's built on a barren desert is going to produce 20% less food, but an extra 20% mana. And this is plains, which is an extra 20% food, which is kind of nice that we're on that. And forests, for instance, if you see mountains and forests, they're going to hamper your movement by an extra point. It takes twice as many movement points to move through hills and forests, but they also give you a defensive bonus. Swamps take up, I think, 3 movement, I believe, to move through, so swamps are really bad. And they give you a defense penalty. Then there's the lava, which it warns you you're going to take 2 damage per turn for just standing on it, and also it's incredibly difficult to move through, and it's terrible. So lava is just awful. Try to avoid building cities on lava. So that's terrain, and notice that, so fertile lands, sort of these green lands, are good for food. Desert is good for mana, and ice, for some reason, is good for money. So be aware of that. As far as when you're building cities in the future, so one of the things you want to do very early on is when your city reaches a population of 5, it can then build settlers to build new cities. And when you build a new city, you'll get pretty much exactly a city like this, except with one population that is slowly going to grow. And where you want to place your city is next to these strategic resources, like pumpkins or silver. The ones to watch out for are, so you're gonna, silver and iron and donkeys and pigs. Those 4 resources are very, very common. And pigs are good for food. Silver is good for money and also has a strategic purpose, which you can build. There are these things called perks, which are incredibly important, which you can use to upgrade your units. They'll be like a little, if you ever see like a little up arrow, golden up arrow here, that means you can buy a perk for that unit for gold. And strategic resources open up those perks for you, so that's really nice. That said, which ones do you want? Like I said, so donkeys are good for money, pigs are good for food, silver is good for money or a perk. But funnily enough, silver is not as valuable in terms of money as donkeys. Donkeys can give you 10 gold per round. Silver will only give you 6. And I forget what so iron's pretty common. Iron is not good for a resource. It gives you 1 gold. Who cares? But it gives you a good strategic value. It gives you a perk that is very basic, and it's resistance to like melee and missile damage, which that's like, so it gives, you can buy a perk for your units to give them melee and missile resistance. Not all perks work for all units. It'll tell you what units the perks are for. It'll say like fighters, which is these crossed swords, or archers, which is like this bow, or it'll say like creatures, which it looks like, I think, a jaw. So yeah, that's a lot of information there. But that basically, I feel like that's about it. That's all you really need to know to get started in one of these games. And to be perfectly honest, you're not going to need all the information I gave you. There's sort of an information, overload there. But that gives you just about everything you need to play the game. There's a lot of strategic considerations there. Since there are pumpkins here, I might as well quickly mention that pumpkins give you mana and food because they're mystical and food. and they can also be used by monsters and undead as a strategic resource. So not all races get the same strategic resources from the same strategic resource. Like the monsters can build Shrine of the Rotting Pumpkin, which is a really good upgrade. It'll give regenerations units. But yeah, so yeah, a lot of information. And there's a lot more to discover. There's a lot more resources out there that you can sort of look. There's a lot of units, and all the different races work slightly differently. It's a wonderfully complex game, but at the same time always remains very simple. The decisions you're making in a turn is usually along the lines of, I'm making a unit, I'll maneuver a unit here or there. It's not that complicated. So it's complex without being complicated. That's why I like it. Okay, so I'm going to end this video here, and I hope it's been helpful. If you want more, the next video, I'm going to continue this game from this point, and play through the whole game. And I'll mention, and there'll be some more advanced tips and tricks and things like that in that video. So I hope this has been helpful, and I will see you guys next time.